Hello, everybody. This is Ray Owens coming to you from Withum Smith & Brown's Cannabis Advisory Services practice. And on today's installment of our What the Hemp podcast, we have my partner, Jonathan Tretter, up here from our Narnia office. Batavia, New York office. And we are going to be talking a little bit about New York State and things that cannabis companies might want to consider if they're getting started in that state. And one of the reasons why we're talking about it today is we were looking up some statistics and we see that the market there is doing about 2.5 billion in sales since it got started, eyeing about 6.1 billion by 2033. But also the amount of dispensaries in that state has doubled in the last year. So we see a lot of opportunity for new business, and we wanted to get ahead of new businesses opening and talk to you a little bit about some New York State credits and other things to consider that might impact your business. So, Jonathan, thank you for joining me today. Very happy to have you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this. Like you said, from Narnia, farm country here in Western New York. So just excited for the conversation.
Excellent. And I think we should give extra brownie points to anybody on the podcast today who can actually pick out Batavia on a map, because I had no idea where it was. So, just a very, very simple place to start. I think a lot of cannabis companies, one of the things we see is that they really rush into trying to get product out the door because the ramp up cycle and the licensing process is so long that they just take the first available site, they start immediately growing, and they rush to try and get product out and cash in because cash is still king. And so I'm just curious, from your tax practice and other similar companies you've worked with, what should people be thinking about that they might not otherwise be thinking about very early on in that process before they just rush product out the door?
Yeah. So, in New York State, if you're considering being a producer, cultivating, growing cannabis, there's some programs that you can take advantage of, but like I'll start with the Brownfield program, but that's something you have to get into before you can be eligible for that program. So, if you're looking to do a greenhouse, restore a property that may have some environmental issues, the Brownfield program is great to get into. The credits you can get are anywhere from 10 to 30 or 40% refundable New York State credits on rehab that you're doing to an environmental property. But once you do the work, it's too late to get into the program. So you got to do it from the start. Same with, New York State. If you're working with ESD, trying to get any incentives for job growth, it's really, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube per se. So I know that it's a rush to revenue, but also you could be leaving a lot of money on the table if you jump in without looking at all your options there.
Okay, great. And so you need to know that you want to do these things before you even pick a site. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. Yeah. And with New York State, they can get aggressive with the incentives that they could offer you, whether it's Excelsior programs. They're competing with 49 other states in the U.S. for these sites. So you don't want them to know you've already made a decision, quite honestly. Like, you want them to know that they're competing with other sites in other states for these projects to really maximize the benefit that you can have with a New York State project.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And that's probably really applicable to multi-state operators that maybe have the ability to go into other states. But I know in cannabis, a lot of our companies are going to be very single state minded because they had to create that entity in that state. They had to go specifically for that New York license. It's very kind of regulated like that, at least until we see all those scheduling barriers come down that might allow for intra-state commerce. So just speaking specifically to New York and these credits and companies that are singularly focused in New York, are these credits available to retailers and producers alike, or is this very simply the agricultural side, the guys who are growing it?
Yeah, New York State is a very agricultural friendly state, I would say, in terms of tax credits and incentives. So it's a lot more on the production ag side, as we call it, the growers, the cultivators, not the retail side, those that are actually growing the crop, and then sending it to market. So that's really where the large opportunity is in New York State. And I know I said multi-state, but there's counties that are aggressive with this. So even if you haven't decided where in New York State you want to do the project, but if there's competing counties across the state that could also leverage the opportunity for you.
Okay. And in what county is Narnia in?
Genesee County.
Okay. So you might have Brownfield, you might have Excelsior. Is it important that you identify as an agricultural company when going through this process? And are there other benefits to the fact that it sounds like New York is really cool with a cannabis company being an agricultural company?
Yeah, at the end of 2024 or 2025, the governor of New York basically said that cannabis is an agricultural crop, which then makes it eligible for all the agricultural benefits that a row crop would have. So 20% investment tax credit, that's refundable. So New York State has a 4% investment tax credit for qualified manufacturers. You buy $1 million worth of equipment, you're getting a 4% New York State tax credit. However, if you're a qualified farm and 2/3 of your revenue comes from agriculture, that 4% credit goes up to 20%. So you do $1 million greenhouse, you're looking at a potential 20%, $200,000 refundable tax credit coming back from New York State. It's, in a lot of cases, New York State farms really view it as a financing mechanism for these projects to make them viable, to really put cash back. And you may need some bridge financing, but it's a pretty big opportunity. Just not to keep going, but on the real estate tax side, New York State has agricultural exemptions. So if you're considered an agricultural entity, you could get preferential real estate tax treatment and, lower real estate tax rates. So it's not a tax credit that's money back in your pocket. It's just less money that you're spending each year on real estate taxes. So,
hey, I mean, that works too, right? A dollar saved is a dollar earned. And you're talking about cannabis where cash is still king, unfortunately. So actually the idea of some property tax savings is pretty exciting too. Because I know there's always questions about income tax credits because you had 280E. Luckily, New York is decoupled, so that's not a state level issue. You may still have some federal issues about what to do with that money. But that all sounds really exciting because it sounds like no matter where you look, there's just dollar signs. It sounds like a startup company, if you're in the tri-state area, you should really look at New York to get started.
Absolutely. And I think to the point of starting early and looking at your options, I think a lot of these, like I said, you have to be a qualified farmer, which is 2/3 of your revenue has to come from agriculture. I think the way you set up your organization, entity structure is important to make sure you can really hit that 2/3 farming exemption, because with that comes, there's a workforce retention credit. So if you're considered a farming entity, any farming employee that works over 500 hours is eligible for a $1,200 tax credit from New York State. So, that doesn't preclude you from investment tax credit, from the ag exemption. There's also school property tax credits for farming entities. So you can really see how these credits can really snowball and build on top of each other. And the workforce retention credit isn't a 1-year credit. It's a credit for every year that you're paying out wages.
Excellent. No, I like everything I'm hearing. I mean, there's only so many reasons for optimism in cannabis right now. And obviously everybody's looking federally at rescheduling, but I mean, I'm looking at New York right now because I'm thinking that it might be a great place to become a farmer. I hadn't really considered that for myself personally, but why the heck not? In terms of common mistakes and some other takeaways, I mean, I'm hearing all these dollar signs. I'm hearing all these great reasons to do it. I know you kind of opened the call by saying you got to get ahead of this. You got to go in with a plan. Any other common mistakes you see from your clients? Any way that they're messing up that Brownfield cleanup credit or Excelsior, any of these other ones?
I just think, entity structure is important because a lot of times the revenue test is based on the entity by entity. So creating a farming entity separate from maybe a retail entity is important to make sure you're not having other sources of revenue that could really trip up the 2/3 revenue tests that make you, a qualified farmer for New York State is important. So really that's an important thing from the start. I guess another thing to remember the year after you get these credits is New York State refundable credits are federally taxable. So, that's just something to keep in mind if you are eligible for these. It's a great deal, but you will have to pick it up as federal income the next year when you receive it. A lot of times that catches clients and farmers by surprise. So just, things to think about as your cash flow planning and tax planning for some of these.
Okay. No, that's a great tip. I mean, we're always trying to see how we can reduce income if we have that limitation on expenses. So that's a good tip right there. I'm curious, when you mention the separate entities for a farming company versus a retail company, is the test done on a unitary basis? Do they look at 2/3 of the enterprise revenue, or are you actually able to silo that subsidiary like that?
For New York State, you're really able to silo that subsidiary. I mean, I think maybe subsidiary is the wrong term. You don't want it to be a subsidiary of a holding company because the test would be based on the reporting taxable and not the reporting entity. So brother, sister would maybe be more of a better structure because, where it's not all flowing up to a singular entity, but it can be entity by entity basis for that 2/3 test.
Okay. No, great tip. And I appreciate you laying that one out because I think a lot of people would have done that wrong with the holding company. One last question before I let you go to what about record keeping and what other kind of substantiation do you need? Is it on the client? Is it on the tax preparer? Are the lawyers getting involved? What kind of costs and what kind of administration goes into pursuing some of these?
So, quite honestly, with New York State, a lot of these refundable credits, we're seeing brownfields almost 100%. You're going to get audited before you get the credit. Even New York State investment tax credit, New York State is going to audit the credit claims before they start sending out hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of refunds. So you self-certify, but just knowing that you're going to have to provide the substantiation before you get the money back. So they want to see copies of invoices, where the money actually was paid out of, what operating entity, stuff like that is important. So we've kind of developed templates for clients when we're going in and claiming these credits. When New York State comes knocking for the documentation, we can just basically turn over a package of information that we know is pretty much audit proof. So,
audit proof sounds good. I did cringe there a little bit, especially in cannabis, that word audit, like that's a dirty word. We don't like to use that. So I guess when I pre-gamed with you for this podcast, I should have given you the list of like 5 dirty words not to say, but I gained a lot of comfort when you talked about it being a smooth process and already kind of having a process going into that audit to make it, very easy on the client. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
This has been really informative and really great. Any parting comments, any last words?
I think it's an exciting time in New York State in agriculture and cannabis. I think making sure all projects are financially viable. New York State's aggressive with that. So just happy to be part of the community here and, helping businesses put some money back in their pockets.
I appreciate you coming to us to talk about that from our Narnia office. So everyone, we're going to drop a link below as we take you out of here to an article that's going to follow up with a lot of these things we were talking about and some other credits that might be available to you. And as always, if you have any questions or if we can help you out, please reach out to us here at Withum at our cannabis advisory practice. Have a great day.